Welcome to the Dr. SuperCoach podcast. You're on with Pig Mentality. I'm the newest member of the Dr. SuperCoach podcast crew. This is the second video in my series looking to identify potential first-time premium scorers. If you like this kind of data analysis, feel free to follow me on Twitter at pig_DRSC. Now on to the content. In 2023, there were 8 players who had never had a 100 SuperCoach averaging season that then in 2023 pumped out a 105 plus average. There were actually 9 of them, including Kieran Briggs, but Ruckman have different important stats, so I'm focusing on non-rucks for this episode. I've already released the video, I looked at the same thing for Ruckman, that's already up on YouTube, so you can feel free to go and watch that at any time. So these 8 don't include returning primos, so there's returning primos like Adam Treloar and Luke Ryan that have averaged 105 in the past, they come back down under 100, and then in 2023 they went back up. I'm not looking at those guys, I'm looking at guys that had never done it before and then went 105 plus, and how did they do it? Because these are season defining picks, you can buy them around 500k and they end up being a full season keeper. They cost you a lot less and they save you so much money. So the first 4, Connor Rozee, Dan Houston, Zach Butters, Adam Chera. These guys all took their average from in the 90s to average over 105. And then 4, Errol Goulden, Caleb Sarong, Nick Dacos and Tom Green. They all did the same. So they all went, Errol's average was a bit lower, the 2022 is 85. So this kind of magic number seems to be guys that are in the 85 to 100 range 1 year. And then how do they get to 105? So to do that, I looked at the 5 most important stats for these players, so for defenders, midfielders and forwards. I judged that to be disposals, marks, clearances, tackles and contested possessions. So I looked at what each of these players had averaged before their breakout year. So for all of these guys it was their whole season before 2023, what were their career averages? But I thought that's just 1 year of sample, 1 year of data points, but I also didn't think 8 seems like a lot. Surely we don't get 8 players breaking out like this every single year. So I went back and looked at 5 years of data. So there's been 19 in the last 5 years. So if you take out the 8, there's been 12 in 4 years. So it's about 3 per year, generally, that have their first ever premium year and they go 105 plus, about 3 per year. 2019 we can see Dunkley and Whitfield did it. 2022 there was a lot did it that year, but that was the COVID year where SuperCoach scoring was boosted, so their actual scores were impacted a lot more. So Luke Ryan, Hugh Greenwood, Jack Steele, Christian Petrarca, Tuke Miller and Jared Lyons. In 2020 they'd never averaged 100, and in that year they went 105 plus. 2021 was 2 players, Daniel Rich and Darcy Parish, and then 2022 Jack Sinclair was the only one to do it. So I looked at all these players, what did they have in common? I actually thought it was going to be games played was kind of going to be what led to a breakout. So I had in my head that because all the guys last year, so the Greens, Sarongs, Gourdens, they were all between 40 and 80 games played. So I thought, oh, maybe that's it. Maybe players break out between that 40 and 80 games played mark. But this showed that wasn't really the case, because there were guys like Nick Dacos that did after 25 games. There were guys like Daniel Rich that took 222 games before he had his breakout year. Even Jack Sinclair 119, Lockie Whitfield 114. So I kind of ruled out games played after this analysis, which I didn't expect to. So then I looked at what did these 5 all have in common. No, what did these 19 all have in common across these 5 important stats. So prior to their breakout year, these were the stats that these guys had for their careers. So I took the lowest possible one. So, for disposals, Hugh Greenwood had a career average of 16.88 disposals before he broke out. For clearances, Luke Ryan he only averaged 0.37 clearances before his breakout year. And then I just rounded down. So if I was doing these filters again, it would include them. And this has given me 5 filters to put in, which I can put into players across the AFL now and say, who in the AFL averages this bottom row? There's 16.8 disposals, 2.4 marks, 0.3 clearances, 2.1 tackles, and 5.4 contested possessions. Because if you don't average these markers, I think it's going to be very hard for you to average 105 plus. And they are quite generous or quite easy filters. Like if you can't get 0.3 clearances a game, and little baby Luke Ryan could do it from a half back, I don't know how you're going to score 105. And if you can't get 16.8 possessions a game, and Hugh Greenwood could do it, then yeah, I don't know how you're getting there. So here we are. These are my filters I've come up with. And I've got a bonus filter there. Like I said, that someone that averaged 85 to 100 seems to be that nice little mark to be then ready to go 105. There are some players, I mean, in the ruck, Kieran Briggs averaged 50 something, and then he went over 105. Rucks are a slightly different story. But there are guys that have a less than 85 average and go 105. But for this, if they don't have that 85 average, 85 to 100, I'm not ruling them out. They only get ruled out if they don't hit the keeper candidate filters, so the 16.8, 2.4 marks, we can see that on the screen. The way to look at it is not if you have these filters, you're going to break out. I think that's quite dangerous. What it means is no one has broken out from the 105. No one has broken out from the 85 to 100 range, broken out to 105 plus if they didn't hit these filters. So if you missed on any of these, no one has broken out in the last 5 years. Now, here's a few just popular players. I'm just going to mention this because I'm not looking at guys that are kind of priced around 60 that might go up to 85, even though if these guys have 25 points of upside, they might be good picks. I'm not looking at, that's not what this episode's about. So I'm looking at guys who I think can be keepers at a discounted price. So I'm looking at the Butters and Sarong of last year, not the Lockie Ash of last year. Even though they might be solid picks, like for instance, Lockie Ash probably made you a bit of money, but he wasn't a keeper. Could do another video on that. We might talk about that in some podcasts, but essentially I'm trying to find you keeper level players that you might have in your final team by round 24 for a discount. So to some popular options that failed the filter. We'll start with the defenders. Will Powell, Kadeem Coleman, Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller. They all failed the filter for one reason or another. Will Powell doesn't get enough disposals or contested possessions to meet the filter. I think that means he'll struggle to score 105, and I say the same for Kadeem Coleman. He could struggle as well. Kadeem Coleman, this doesn't necessarily mean these guys are a bad pick. You've got to make your own decision on that. What I'm telling you here, and what you should use this video for, is saying the data suggests that these players will not average 105. Okay? Now, Kadeem Coleman could come out, average 102, could make you a heap of money and be a stepping stone to a keeper. You just need to make that decision. But what I'm saying here is I don't think these guys will average 105. Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller does get enough disposals and marks and clearances, but his tackles and contested possessions are well down from where they need to be. So I don't think he will average 105, and I don't think he'll be a keeper defender. We'll go to the midfielders. These two are very popular players, Nick Martin and Carl Amon. They're very popular because they have midfield status. They're rumoured to be going to play the year at half back, get a lot of disposals that way, get defender status. Now remember, to be a keeper end of season defender, you want to be averaging 105. That's what the top 6 did last year. This filter is saying Carl Amon and Nick Martin won't average 105. They might average 104.3, who knows, but I'm not going to bet on them averaging 105 and being a defender keeper. But it is a bit harsh because they were very close. Carl Amon missed out by 0.4 contested possessions across his career. Nick Martin missed out by 0.17 tackles. So if they had have just had a few more games with a few more of those, they might have made the filter. So I think this one's a little bit borderline. I don't want to be hard and fast and say they will not average 105 because, they could. But I'm probably going to say I think it's unlikely. And you then need to make the decision of whether you buy that or whether they're going to average 105, I'll get them in. Because if either of these guys average 105, they are incredible picks and you should select them. But you need to make that decision. And my data says I'm not ready to take that risk. Two players here who are popular options and failed the filters, Sam Flanders and Zach Fisher. I'll talk about Zach first because I think these two are very different boats. Zach Fisher just missed out in marks. He was quite unlucky, but he's also injured coming into the season, so you've got to take that into consideration. Zach's only 378k, so he doesn't need to average 105 to be a good pick. What this field is saying is he won't average 105, but if he averages 95, that's a smash pick, and you've done very well there. So these two, while they failed the filter, I'm not saying they're bad picks. I'm just saying I don't think they'll average 105. Sam Flanders I will talk a bit more on because he's very interesting right now. So he averaged 44 in his first 4 games of last year before he got dropped to the VFL. Then he came back in and he averaged 106 after his bye. So can he do this 105? Yeah, well, maybe he can. He did that by taking his disposals up to 29 disposals per game, and he had a very high mark count with very low CBAs. So he was getting 30-ish% CBAs from memory. He was doing it on high disposals and high marks. He was going at 1.1 point per minute, which is insane. That's kind of Rowan Marshall, the best in the league territory. I don't see Sam Flanders keeping up a 1.1 points per minute, but he might. His 78% game time might go up. His disposals for his career have been low, but I just think that's the roles he's been playing. He's a lot better than that. And if Dimmock does really look after him and feed him, as his quote's been saying, Sam Flanders could average 105. The filter's saying he hasn't done it enough in his career to prove that to me. But he also doesn't need to average 105. If he averages, 95, he's probably a top 6 forward comfortably. So although he doesn't meet the filter, and 105 might be, the upper echelon of what's possible for him as an average, I still think he could be a good pick if he gets 95. So you just need to weigh that up. And he's also got that early buy, so you need to weigh that up as well. I put this slide in because this is a quote I like. Data is a tool for enhancing intuition. If you saw my Ruckman video, I talked a bit about this as well. It's that we can have the best data in the world. We can put the data through our spreadsheet, get these names, and it doesn't mean they're all going to do what we think the data says they're going to do. It's all about how you interpret the data and what you do with it from there. So the reason I say that is because a lot of people pass this filter. Like I said, they were quite basic filters and, quite easy to jump over. But there's not going to be 40 or 50 players this year that have never averaged 100 that then become premiums and average 105. That's not going to happen. So when we see data, use your gut feeling, trust your gut feeling, trust the eye test, and look at it through that lens as well. And the reason I said that is because here is a list of names that pass the filter. So based on the filter, they've got a good SuperCoach scoring pedigree or SuperCoach scoring game. But I think they're unlikely to become a premium for various reasons. Some of them just don't have the right role. Some of them don't have enough game time. Some of them are sub-risks. There's things like that. So there's guys in here like Darcy Byrne-Jones, Jack Billings, Jay Gresham, Liam Baker, Jack Bowes that, they pass the filter, which kind of means if they were in the perfect role with the perfect time on ground, they probably could average 105. Like, they've got the skill set. But there's a variety of reasons why I don't think any of these players will average 105. And if you feel free to pause the video if you want and actually read through these names. You might disagree. You might think, oh no, Jai Caldwell's got 105 in the bag. And if he does, pick him. Here's some guys who pass the filter, and I couldn't confidently say they will average 105. I'm not willing to bet on it, but I'm going to call them the why not me guys. Like, I don't know if any of you NBA fans followed Russell Westbrook's MVP year. He was putting up some huge statistics and he said, why not me? Why can't I win the MVP? These guys could do that. Maybe not the MVP, but they could average 105 for the first time in their career ever. I couldn't really give you a strong enough argument of why they don't make it. So I've put them here. This is really where you need to look at them and you need to make a gut call and trust your judgment. And here's the other three: Shea Bolton, Dylan Moore, Josh Dacos. I'm not ready to bet on them averaging 105, but if they do, it would not shock me. And if you're really hot on one of these, start them. They're at this 500k price point, same price point that kind of Butters and Rosie and all those guys were at the start of last year. So if you think these guys can average 105, I'm not going to argue against that because I couldn't justify to myself, give myself a good enough reason why they wouldn't. This next slide, these guys pass the filter. I've called them Piglets, mainly because I think it's a year or two too early for them. Like maybe 1 year too early. I think these guys have insane SuperCoach pedigree. I think they're going to come in and dominate in a few years. I just think they don't quite have the role and probably another 20 odd games under their belts needed. In particular, Will Ashcroft is going to miss the first half of this year. He's going to come back at the halfway point approximately. Coming into next year, he might be around the 30, 35 games played, so he might need another year again to become a proper premium. But he's got all the talent in the world. Josh Ward and Ben Hobbs, I'm really hot on these guys, but not this year. I think they need 1 more year in the system to really cement themselves and get that, prime time midfield role. If Ben Hobbs and Josh Ward can get up to that kind of 70% CBA mark, I think they're absolute SuperCoach guns. So I just also want to say with them, if you're in a keeper league and anyone drops anyone on this page, you just go nab them, hold them for a year, and they could be premiums next year. Jason Horne-Francis, I nearly had him in the next category, which is people I think could break out to 105. I've probably put him in here. I think it's probably half a year too early for him in terms of, I think he could have an up and down first half of the year. He could have some big scores and he could have some average scores that kind of see him averaging around 90. But I just think he's a gun. And by mid-year, after his bye potentially, I could see him being one of those guys that goes 105 post-bye and just lights it up. He does need to work on his disposal efficiency and things like that, but I'm big on all four of these, and I think we're probably a year and a half away from Ashcroft, a year away from Hobbs and Ward, but probably only half a year away from Jason Horne-Francis averaging 105. So keep an eye on them. If Jason Horne-Francis had forward status, I would be heavily considering picking him. I probably would be, actually. So there's that. Now we go into the first candidate for my first-time premium. Remember, these 6 players coming up are players that have never averaged 100, and I think very well could go 105 plus. I'm not saying they will, and as I've got Hinge at number 6, I'm not super confident, but it wouldn't shock me. So he hit all the filters in terms of he averages enough disposals, gets enough marks, clearances, tackles, contested possessions. He's in that 43 games played, so my arbitrary 40 to 80 that, Butters and Goulden and Green are in. He averaged 85 SuperCoach last year if I generously round up a little bit. I've also included a breakout comparison here. I don't really like doing this. I don't like when people go, oh, look, there's Harley Reid. He's the next Dustin Martin. Or they go, there's Brandon Ingram. He's the next Kevin Durant for you NBA fans. I don't really like that. I think it puts too much pressure, undue pressure on the people. But I know people do it because people like to have a visual and a comparison. So I've kind of done it. I looked at those. So how I did this, I looked at those 19 players in the last 5 years that have had this first-time breakout, and then looked at their 5 stat categories, so disposals, clearances, tackles, contested possessions, and marks, and who does he most compare to, and how good is that match? So Mitch Hinge most compared to 2023 Errol Goulden. It's only 76% match, so there's a bit of variation, but essentially that means that doesn't mean I think he's going to do an Errol Goulden. What that means is he scores in a similar way, which is outside disposals, a few clearances, quite a few marks, less contested possessions than some of the other guys. So it just means he scores in a similar way. So why do I think Hinge could be good? Well, he averaged 85 last year, and that includes 2 games, one where he's injured on 80 and one where he's injured on 14. So if you take those games out, it would definitely boost his average up into the 90s. For the second half of the year after his bye, he was kind of used as the Crows quarterback. So there are a lot of games, if you go back and watch Adelaide, where he wasn't in the midfield, but he'd come up just behind the midfield and Laird or Crouch or Dawson would flick it back to him, kind of like a quarterback, and then he'd kick it up the field. So they started doing that in the second half of the year, and his scoring just went off as well for the same reason. So in the second half of the year, his marks went up, his tackles went up, his kick-ins doubled to 2.6, his time on ground went up, his SuperCoach scoring in the first half of the year was 74. He took that up to 98 post-bye. So he's not even that far away from the 100 post-bye. His points per minute also went up from 0.73, which is not very good, to 0.9, which is pretty solid. We look at 1.1 as kind of the absolute top points per minute. Anything over 1's pretty good, so he got up to 0.9. So for me, there's no reason he can't go 98 plus this year. Remember, he did 98 for the whole second half of the year last year. 105 might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm not prepared to rule it out just yet. He could do this, and if he did, he would be an absolute knockout at pick at 470k. So I think if you're hot on Mitch Hinge, let this sway you a little bit, or at least think about it a bit more. The way I'd say it is people are picking Kadeen Coleman and Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller and even Will Powell a bit around this price. I wouldn't be going anywhere near any of those guys when Mitch Hinge is available. I'm not saying pick Mitch Hinge necessarily, but I'm saying he will be better than all three of those. Next candidate is Will Day, and this is just unfortunate that Will's injured to start the year. I'm pretty big on Will Day. I had him in last year and it was a lot of fun. As a Bombers fan, I've seen people online comparing Will Day to a young James Hird. Just the way he moves, he's so silky, gets a lot of marks and tackles. And once someone told me that, I just couldn't get the image out of my head, and yeah, I love Will Day now. So he clears all of the filters quite comfortably. He's in that 54 games played. I remember, that's just arbitrary, but that's something I'm just in the back of my head think's a nice little number. He's ready to go. He had a 97.4 average last year, and that includes 92 average pre-buy. He took that up to 104 post-buy. So if he just goes at what he did at the end of the year last year, I can see him getting to 105 just with a bit of natural progression as well. His points per minute was 0.92, and he took that up to 1.08 after his buy. Remember, 1.1's like a golden number, so he's pretty close. His kick-to-handball ratio improved. His disposal efficiency greatly improved post-buy, and his marks went up. And this is all with CBA staying the same, so he doesn't even need to improve CBAs. It's just better kick-to-handball ratio and improved efficiency is really what boosted him up. There's no reason that can't continue. Like I said, it's just a shame that he isn't starting the year for us. Next one is number 4 is Hayden Young. So Hayden Young, his last 5 games, we know he moved into the midfield. His disposals were actually very similar when he was playing off halfback to playing in the midfield. And his marks went down, as you probably can expect when you go in the midfield, but his tackles went way up. So he's attending 74% CBAs. I don't see a reason that 74 isn't achievable for him. Sounds like he's going to be one of their main mids this year. But with all those things you get being in the midfield, mainly tackles, his SuperCoach went from 90 in the first half of the year to 106 post-buy. His points per minute went from 0.86 up to that magical 1.1 number. Now, for all these guys I'm saying did 1.1 in the second half of the year, that's amazing. I don't see them keeping up 1.1 for an entire year. There's only a few players that did that last year, but the fact that they can do it over a 10-week stretch is pretty impressive. Hayden's breakout comparison was Dan Houston of last year. His stats that he has coming into this year were very similar to Dan Houston's coming into last year. Now, he's going to be playing a very different role than Dan Houston did last year, so that's something to note. But 84% match is actually the highest one we have here. He averaged 94 last year. I think this is just a good pick, I think. I'm going to let you make the decision whether you want it or not, but 105 I think is very much on the cards, which makes him around a top 6 defender, makes him a keeper for 520k, which is exactly what I'm looking for in this video. Number 3, Harry Shiel. This really, really depends on his role, and we haven't really got any clear messaging out of North. There was a report saying he will be playing half-back, but that was also in the match sim when there's 2 teams, so obviously 4 half-backs. He himself has said he might be moving around. It's hard to know at the moment, but we know this guy's a gun. He broke the record for the most disposals in a rookie season last year, albeit he did have one more game than other rookies have played, but he still did it. In the second half of the year, he lifted himself as well. 97 SuperCoach pre-buy, 103 post-buy. His kick-ins actually tripled in the second half of the year, went up to 4.1 a game. His disposals were similar and his tackles went up. So he was getting around the ball, doing a bit more. He could be one of those guys that does move into the midfield a bit and still scores really well there. My only concern if he's playing that half forward role that they kind of drafted him as, but he's such a good talent. You want him around the ball. In the second half of the year, his disposal efficiency also went way up from 74 up to 82. So there were quite a few reasons why he had that uptick, averaging 103 post-buy. If he's in a kind of half-back role or a midfield half-back hybrid role, I'm penciling him for 105 and a top 6-ish keeper defender. There might even be 105 was what the top 6 defenders averaged last year as a minimum. It might be more this year. There might be kind of 8 or 9 guys averaging that 105, but still puts him around the same mark of the Dan Houstons and the Luke Ryans, and at 556k, if he's got the right role, this is a pick I'll be getting on, but if there's still unknowns about the role, I'm not too sure. Now, the next two I'm super keen on, and for the guys that are in Dr. Supercoach Slack, these two names are probably no surprise when you've seen me chatting about them. But first up, Chad Warner, midfielder. He absolutely smashes all of these filters, especially disposals, clearances, tackles, contested possessions. He's 60 games played. He averaged 100 Supercoach. I think he's just ready to go. There are question marks about this Sydney midfield. They've got so many mouths to feed. They've just brought in James Jordan, Taylor Adams. Is that a concern? It probably is. And I'd like to see what he does in round 0 and the preseason as well. But I just think he's in the absolute prime, ready to break out years. And if Sydney aren't using him and giving him 75% CBAs, I think they're wasting an insane talent. Having said that, he did struggle a little bit more after his bye. So actually most of Chad's stats went down after his bye, whereas everyone else I'm talking about how they rocketed home. He actually still averaged over 100 despite a poor finish. So his disposal efficiency and kick-to-handball ratio went up, so that probably actually helped steady the ship a bit. His points per minute went down. He averaged 97 after his bye as opposed to 101 before it. So not a massive change, but he hasn't kind of finished the year strong and made us really confident like the other guys had. I just think it's his time. I think if Sydney aren't putting him in the midfield and just letting him loose, they're missing a trick. And you can't judge it too much because nothing comes out of Sydney social medias. But they've posted 2 or 3 times about Chad Warner and not many times about anyone else. Probably doesn't mean much, but it's got me hyped. And if he didn't have a round 0 bye, I'd probably start him. But he does have a round 0, so he's got an early bye, so I'm not sure. But it means we get a look at him anyway. I might just target him after his bye at 600k, kind of like I did with Sarong last year, if he does what I expect him to do. Number 1, no surprise to those in Slack or even those on Twitter, I've been banging the Jai Newcomb drum a bit. Jai destroys pretty much all of these filters, way over in disposals, doubles it in marks, clearances, tackles, contested possessions. He's a beast. He's played 51 games in his career. He averaged 98.3 SuperCoach last year, and he's the number 1 guy in that midfield, and I think he's just ready to go ham. I don't see a reason he can't go 105. He did. So Jai averaged 96 pre-buy. He averaged 104 post-buy. So he's nearly at that 105 post-buy. And I just think there's more natural progression, another off-season for him. He's looking stronger and fitter based on Hawthorn photos. So pre-buy, Jai averaged 24 disposals. Post-buy took that up to 27. Interesting, his tackles are actually a lot less than a lot of the top 8 mids when you compare them. You look at these top 8 mids and see what stats get you a top 8 mid. His tackles are a lot lower, which is actually really surprising given he broke the record for most tackles in his first game and was a tackling beast. But being able to get his disposals up to 27 a game post-buy, and his points per minute went from 0.9, they went up to 1.09, so very close to that magic number. I just think there's natural progression. He's coming, whether he gets to the 110 or even 113, that's probably needed to be a top 8 mid. So 113 was the mark for a top 8 mid last year. Whether he gets to that, I'm not so sure, which kind of makes me then question why you're even starting him. This one for me is a data thing that he ticks the boxes, but for me it's more of a gut feeling. I just think he's got Caleb Sarong of 2023 in him. Like I think he could do 113. I've got this last spot in my team at the moment that's rotating between probably Jai Newcomb, Harry Shiel, or if they don't work out, it could be an Ollie Wines or a Matt Crouch or a Cam Guthrie. I don't know. I've got this one spot that's rotating. I think at the moment Jai's sitting in it, but it could depend on preseason and could easily go to Shiel if he has the role I want. And I'm not too worried about having that go wrong necessarily because there are so many pivot options. We don't like to spend early trades and book them in. But if you're just really hot on a guy and you think it's going to happen and you just want to trust your gut, just do it. And then if you have to pivot, it's one trade, so what? That might be my Jai Newcomb philosophy. I'm not too sure yet, but yeah, I'm ready for the Jai breakout. Just to recap, here are the 6 players that I think can go 105 that have never gone 100 before. So that's what I'm classifying as first time premium. I've talked about them all and why I think they can go 105. Whether they actually do, especially Hinge and Day, I'm not super sure, but I think they could. I can definitely see a world where they do it. Young, I'm pretty confident in. Shiel, if he has the role, I'm thinking he will. He'll go 105. Newcomb and Warner, I'm very confident go 105. But you also need to take into consideration what position they play. So Hinge and Young and Shiel going 105 at their price is brilliant. That is an absolute smash pick, and you've got a D6 keeper for much cheaper than the other premiums. So if you think Hinge goes 105, pick him. If you think Young and Shiel go 105, pick them. For the other 3, the midfielders, 105 probably isn't enough to be a good pick. They probably need to go 110. 113 would be ideal to get to that D8, M8 kind of level. 110, I think still close enough. 110, I think you had guys like Parrish and Tom Green was 111. So they were fine last year. So if you think Will Day, Chad Warner or Jai Newcomb can average 110, I think that's the bar. I'm not so sure on Day. Warner's probably maybe. I could see it happening. Jai Newcomb's probably, if I'm going to take a punt, I'm going to take it on Jai. And there's also the fun factor. You've got to have a bit of fun playing SuperCoach. If you're watching this video, you're probably a bit more serious and going for ranking, and I am too. You can have fun while going for ranking. It doesn't matter if you get one pick, not exactly 100%, and need to just pivot. But I think Jai can be 110, and me saying that, it's essentially what Tom Green and Errol, I believe, did last year. So why not him? All right, that's all for me now. It's been one of my longer videos, but had a bit to get through. I've still got Ruckman written there. That's annoying. Ignore that. That should say everyone except Ruckman. But essentially, if you like this video, we're going to be putting a lot more coming out soon. We've got podcasts, got more YouTube videos coming out. I'm pretty active on Twitter, especially once the season gets going. I'll be posting a fair bit. So there's my handle. Go follow me, Pig@DRSC. If you know where to find the other boys, if you don't, it's JB_DRSC, Chizo_DRSC, and Pistol_DRSC, all on Spotify. The main page is Dr_SC. So, get around all them. Press the little dingy bell on YouTube if you want to hear more. Go find us on Patreon if you want to get more content. There is a few things behind quite a cheap little Patreon sign up. And then get ready for some episodes to start dropping on Spotify as well. So that's me done. Hope you enjoyed this. Let us know in the comments if you're going to pick any of these 6 that I mentioned. Let me know what you think of Jai Newcomb. See if I've convinced you or not. If I haven't, that's alright. But have a good one, and I'll chat to you soon.